You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties. Join us. Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era and improv news stories straight off the cuff and only sometimes in the buff to imagine how we might improve our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
Mike.
We were raised by rentals. Mike, we are back from our journey into space with the Xenomorphs and the Yautja with our big Alien Day special in our last episode. And I don't know about you, it's been a couple weeks and I'm still exhausted.
Yeah. No, that was a lot of homework and a lot of thinking power right there.
It was a lot of homework. It was a lot of movies to watch, a lot of planning. And, you know, I like that this show typically is pretty off the cuff. And like I said, you know, maybe sometimes in the buff, you guys can figure out what episode we recorded nude. You know, it's part of the fun, right? It's like an Easter egg.
Right. I mean, maybe I am now. Maybe I'm not. Who knows?
Who's to say? But yeah, I do like the improv angle of the show. I mean, that's really, really our deal. And so it was really cool to be able to incorporate at least some of the, you know, off the dome nature of our storytelling in the last episode, even though we were kind of forced to plan it all out ahead of time. Right. So for this episode, I wanted to do something that was like more improv. You wanted to do something that was like easier and more lighthearted.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much homework.
Something that I didn't have to watch, 9 to 13 movies.
Well, there actually are kind of a lot of movies across this total franchise. I don't think I counted them, but let's figure that out, Mike. How many movies are there that have featured Spider-Man?
Featured Spider-Man or just Spider-Man movies?
Spider-Man movies. Like, well, there's the Sam Raimi ones, the first one.
Yeah, so there's 3 of those. There's 2 amazing, so that's 5, and then 3 MCU. So what, 8 total?
8? I think 5 plus 3 is 8.
Yeah, I'd say there's the 8, and then you have, I mean, if we go back to other forms of media, we have the old Japanese Spider-Man TV show. We have the really piss poor American adaptation of it. We have multiple cartoons, from like the old 1960s and 70s, like static animation, Marvel, like almost animated comic books they would put on TV. Then you have like Spider-Man the Animated Series, Spider-Man Unlimited. You have the MTV Spider-Man. There was so many different Spider-Man cartoons over the years. But yeah, I think eight movies in total. He has popped up in a lot of other MCU movies.
Yeah, that's true. And that's really cool to see. Plus, there's been other movies in the like Sonyverse, I guess, that are Spider-Man related, like Venom and Morbius, and Carnage, or whatever that Venom movie was called.
Venom, Let There Be Carnage.
There you go.
Which actually wasn't bad. I will defend it.
I still haven't seen it. I still want to. I do really like the cast, so I still would like to see. It's on my list of things. I actually started watching through the Spider-Man movies again, and then decided, you know what? No, I don't want to do that. I don't want homework.
Yeah, I didn't watch a single one of them.
So, yeah, I aborted it. Well, I was thinking this would be my chance to finally watch some of the stuff I haven't seen yet, like that Carnage movie, and Morbius, which, I've heard bad things about, but I'm still curious.
I hate Jared Leto. I don't hate the movie, but I will say this. It is totally a complete nonsensical mess. Like, I don't hate it on the same level that I don't hate the Dolph Lundgren Punisher, where as a film, it's fun. Like, I enjoy myself. As a movie about a character that I know stuff about, I don't enjoy it so much. And that's kind of where I am with Morbius.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really great segue into like the entire state of Marvel movies prior to probably Blade, where there was Nick Fury and Punisher and Captain America and Howard the Duck. And it seemed like every time that somebody tried to bring a Marvel character to the big screen. Hell, even with like the made-for-TV Hulk movies, it seemed like every time they've tried to bring something to the screen, something was way off. It was either the fact that they changed so many details seemingly randomly,
Mm-hmm.
or they, for budget reasons or for these reasons because of the state of special effects at the time, they had to make changes, or it was just like made for TV, so like no one gave a shit really, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
there was this general thought or this general impression in Hollywood forever that like, oh, superheroes are for kids,
Yep.
And hell, I just watched a video today about the making of the Rocketeer movie, and that movie was in development for like 10 years because it went through so many different changes, almost entirely because Disney or whoever, somebody kept coming down and saying, well, it's got to be for kids, right? It's comic books, got to be for kids, right? And the filmmakers kept trying to make it more adult. And like even Dave Stevens, who created The Rocketeer, was like, Betty Page is literally in the comic book, right? Betty Page, like the adult erotic model, is literally a main character in the comic. Like, if you read it, it's full of like mobsters and Nazis.
It's for kids. I'm not a kid. I don't read it. Why would I read it? I just make the decisions. Oh, I hate it. I hate that
it.
shit.
Well, and for years, people kept trying to get a Spider-Man movie made, like a good one, for a long time. There was always rumors going around that, some movie or other, like Batman '89 or even The Rocketeer itself, was proof enough that, oh, well, we can do these things now. And like, look at Batman. It was such a huge hit. And now, we're going to make all these comic book movies. And it's funny because, again, the video I watched today on YouTube, it was funny because they pointed out the fact that Hollywood, for some reason, didn't go from like Batman into like, hey, let's make Spider-Man or Superman or Wonder Woman. They didn't go to like the other big superheroes that everybody knows. It was like they either went to really obscure characters that no one had ever heard about, or they went to like the underground comics and did shit like The Crow. And it was like, why did you go to those ends of the spectrum when Wonder Woman is right there?
And you know what I almost feel like it was, as I feel like Hollywood was doing that thing where it's like, we're not there yet. We're not ready for this character. Like, we can't do the special effects we want to do. So pick something that nobody knows and just stick it out there. Something we can completely change and morph to our own whims. Because you did get a lot of that. Like, you had stuff like the fucking Shadow and like the Phantom and like these, like the Rocketeer you mentioned, like comic books or old radio serials, or like, there was a lot of that popping up, especially in the 90s. But I feel like Batman 80, was it 89 that came out? 89 or 88? Can't remember. I think 89. Yeah.
89, yeah.
So you had Batman 89, and it's like, DC has always had a little bit more luck in cinemas back in the day, before like the late 90s, early 2000s. DC was the one getting movies into theaters. Like, you had the Superman movies, you had the Batman movies, that those did well. They pretty much sold. Whereas Marvel, it was like direct to television and direct to VHS, with stuff like The Punisher and that Captain America that just was like supposed to come to theaters, but they were like, we got Italian Red Skull and rubber ears. I don't know what to tell you. Put it on video. That then we had shit like, the made-for-TV Nick Fury and the made-for-TV Gen X movie, which, oh my God, that was so bad. We had all sorts of shit like that. We had the made-for-TV Captain America movie where he's got the see-through plastic shield, and a motorcycle helmet.
The motorcycle helmet. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
There was a lot of those types of movies with Marvel. Like, Marvel, they did well in the world of cartoons. Like, they had the X-Men cartoon and everyone loved it, and the Spider-Man cartoon. And then DC was like, you know what? Fuck you. And they come around with the Batman animated series and Superman animated series and just fucking crushed them. So for the longest time, it wasn't until Blade that Marvel really started to get their shit together. I mean, the biggest Marvel movie we had prior to Blade was Howard the Duck. I mean, seriously, let that sink in.
Yeah.
Everything else was straight to video or straight to television or just canceled altogether, like Roger Corman's Fantastic Four.
Yep.
Howard the Duck was the biggest Marvel movie until 1998.
It's
That's
crazy.
crazy.
And it is. And you mentioned something important too, which is that Hollywood for the longest time would never be faithful to the comic book source material. And
Right.
we bitched about this on one of our Rental Rent episodes where it's like, why are you adapting something that already has a built-in audience of thousands or millions, and yet deciding that you, some single person, some director with a vision, that somehow your ideas are better than the shit that people already like. Millions of people already like it.
Yep.
And you want to put your stamp on it. And because they treat these comics like they're just a starting point, like, oh, this is just a rough idea, and you mentioned things like the spirit, and it's like, no, like that character has been around for decades, has been hugely popular amongst multiple generations. And some Hollywood upstart's gonna be like, yeah, but I can make it better. It's like, no, you can't. And I think
Yep.
Hollywood finally figured that out, because now you see the current spate of like Marvel movies, for example, and they're getting more and more and more loyal to the comics and taking more stories from the comics, and
Oh, yeah.
in some cases just taking like storylines or mini series, just whole cloth, and just putting them on screen. And they're successful. And then it's like, duh, people, come on. Like, how long did it take you to figure that out? And I
Well,
think with something like Blade, it was like, it wasn't exactly like the comic, but it was so close to the comic that the things they added were actual improvements rather than like arbitrary changes.
right. And I feel like with a comic like or with a property like Blade, the average person, mom and dad have not heard of Blade. So it's just like, oh, it's some action movie with Wesley Snipes and vampires. Okay, cool. Whereas like everyone knows who Spider-Man is. Everyone knows who the X-Men are. Everyone knows who Superman is. So it's like there wasn't as much of a risk doing it with a character like Blade, because it's like, well, if we fuck up, it's Blade. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know,
It's a supporting character from Ghost Rider and Dracula comics.
right. And I feel like that kind of idea, permeated the concept of comic book movies on the whole. Like, yeah, there were standouts like Superman and Batman, but on the whole, it was like, what can we get away with that, is based on a comic book that maybe people aren't going to care about, or there's a niche audience like Ninja Turtles. The Ninja Turtles movie, when that came out, yeah, it was, a lot of people knew it from the cartoons. They didn't even know about the comic book. So like myself included, like I was reading the comics as a kid, but I was reading the comics because I was reading the Archie comics based on the cartoon. So I eventually started getting into the Mirage comics. Like, it was one of those things. I remember getting a Mirage comic and being really confused, then getting the Archie comics, and then going back and reading the Mirage comics and being like, oh, okay, this is different. So when the first movie came out, like, I wanted Bebop and Rocksteady, and I was sad that didn't happen. But it was based on the comic book. So, it's an indie movie, even though it was a huge property, but the film was based on an indie comic. You had a lot of that kind of shit, even into the early 2000s, because you had stuff like Ghost World getting its own movie. So there were a lot of things like people didn't know they were based on comics. It was almost like dipping your toe in, like, do we want to open this Pandora's box? Like, I don't know if we want to go down this. And even when they did in the early 2000s, there was a lot of that. Well, how will it translate to screen? Like, even though they had faith in the property, they still didn't have full faith in the property. So you had stuff like Black Suited X-Men. You had Green Goblin Power Ranger. You had this shit that like didn't quite work or didn't quite look like the comic, but whatever, it worked for the story they were trying to tell. Now, I just saw the newest Guardians of the Galaxy yesterday, and they're wearing the fucking costumes from the comic book finally. Yeah. And it's like, holy shit, like they're just straight up like that's how they drew it in the comic, make it work on screen.
Yeah.
And like there are so many examples of that in the MCU right now where it's like, you know, fuck fuck changing it. Like just put what you saw on the page on the screen and make it work.
Yeah,
And
and people will love it, and all the fans will like it even more
mhm.
because it's loyal to and you won't get that whole subculture of people on the internet who just bitch because they changed this and they changed the costume and that's not his right hair color or eye color or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
you make everybody happy if you just film it. Just film it.
Yep. Exactly.
But you're right. So going back to the 90s, more good examples of like there were movies based on comics, but people were almost afraid to let it be known that it was a comic because there was still the stigma of like, oh no, we're not Howard the Duck, we're not Punisher.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
people, I remember when like the Mask movie came out, nobody had
Oh
any
yeah.
idea. Or Men in Black is based on a comic,
Mhm.
and the creator of that comic is famous on like Twitter for all these comments he's made over the years about how he's constantly trying to like tell people about like, oh yeah, the movie's based on this and this and this, and like nobody believes him because nobody has any idea who he is because his comic was like so obscure that like he has this whole like cottage industry or whatever of just going on Twitter and talking about, yeah, this one time I overheard these people talking and I tried to tell them, let him know, and they told me to shut up. And it's like because nobody has any idea who he is.
Oh, that kind of sucks.
Yeah. And his name is Lowell Cunningham, by the way. Anyway, so I say, before Blade, let's do something, with the Marvel property, like Spider-Man in the 90s and see if we could come up with something like what Hollywood would have done at the time. And I think there needs to be some combination of Hollywood in the 90s would have made arbitrary changes or like budget restriction changes, but at the same time, if we're in charge, what would we
Right.
have done? Like, we would have made the movie loyal enough that it would have been a hit. Like again, and X-Men I know came out like what 99 or 2000.
2000, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good example of like it's loyal enough to the comics that people were happy with it,
Mhm.
and they did make a lot of changes. A lot of those were based on budget. Um, so it's like let's back it up a couple of years and talk about Spider-Man in the 90s.
Let's just smack it right in the middle, like 1995.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking the exact same thing, either 95 or 96. And I only say maybe 96 because of some of like the actors who were popular at the time, because I definitely want to do like a fan cast.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But I had 95 on my list too, and actually I had it for a specific reason, not just because it was smack dab in the middle, but because in 1995 in Wizard magazine, the guide to comics that I recently described Wizard magazine on Facebook as the MTV of comics in the 90s, and even though I didn't get a lot of engagement on that comment, I am impressed with myself for thinking of that, because I was like, that's exactly what it was. For comic book fans in the
Absolutely.
90s, it was the taste maker, it was the career maker, it was the pop culture source for like everything. It wasn't like just comics, but it was
Mhm.
also very like, whiz bang boom, very flashy and and very focused on like, the pop in the pop culture, you know. Um,
Absolutely.
and in 1995, in Wizard issue 42, they did one of their casting call articles, which we have totally just ripped off on the show in the past by doing our own like fan cast.
Oh yeah.
And it's because you and I both read these a lot when we were like teenagers.
Yep.
And in this issue, they did a casting call for a Spider-Man movie, and this issue came out in '95. So I'm thinking this is the perfect anchor for the decade because I like some of the choices that they made. Some of them I think are ridiculous, and I think I have better ideas.
Same.
But I think it's perfect. Um, and the only other thing that I want to say about this being in the 90s is there was a rumor going around for years, and it was partially true, that James Cameron was connected to Spider-Man, that he had
Mhm.
purchased the rights, or his film's production company had purchased the rights at some point. And of course, James Cameron, became like the fucking god of Hollywood, after like T2, and of course Titanic would have been after this. But I mean, he did The Abyss, and he just had like hit after hit after hit, all the way back to Terminator,
Yep.
and Aliens, and like it's like I'm mixing up the timeline in my head, but I'm like, someone like that who literally like put money and investment into inventing special effects, and like hiring people who could do cutting edge stuff like the liquid metal. I mean, he was like the George Lucas of that time period, just inventing new ways to make huge action, bigger than live action on the screen. So if James Cameron had made this movie in the 90s, we would have had a way to do the special effects with the swinging and the webs and all of that.
Right. And honestly, it probably would have just been as simple as someone swinging, like a stuntman in a costume swinging from a rope that they would have just kind of like rotoscoped over top of.
Yeah. Yeah, and someone like James Cameron would have been able to command the budget to, pay a whole, room full of people to go over it like cell by cell and like,
right?
hand paint in like the Todd
webbing.
McFarlane spider, the spaghetti webs,
Yeah, exactly. Oh, spaghetti webs. I always loved those. They looked so weird.
They look so weird, man. Todd McFarlane doesn't get enough credit. People make fun of him because of Spawn and his toy company, but like, man, he really, broke a lot of ground. He pioneered a lot of things.
I've always had a soft spot for McFarlane. It's like I don't care that he doesn't know how many teeth are in a human head or how many joints the human body has. Like, damn it, I don't care if he thinks every human being has 6 knees. Like, it's fun. I like the comics.
Yeah, we could go on and on about how influential he was, from comics to characters, specifically like Spider-Man and Venom, and then of course with Spawn and the launch of Image Comics and creator rights and his the like revolutions in like toy design that he spearheaded or at least funded, and his like professional baseball investment career and his like obsession with sports memorabilia. I mean, the guy's all over the place, but so many really like huge changes in those industries were all kind of spearheaded by him. He's a really influential guy, and I feel like he's kind of forgotten about to a certain extent these days.
I mean, I do have to say one thing about him that I've always admired, even as a teenager. Like, one of the things that always made me really like McFarlane is he always kind of did it his own way. There was a lot of like, oh, well, you can't do it that way, and him being like, well, why not? And be like, well, that's just how it's done. You can't do it that way. And he's like, well, fuck it, I'm gonna do it that way anyway. Like he did that. He did that with comics, where it was like, like, and he's told this story multiple times about like Spider-Man, where he had this whole vision for a scene where basically Spider-Man like fights a racist, and like he messes with the guy being like, how do you know I'm not black under this mask? And like just really screws with this guy who like admired Spider-Man. And he was like, well, yeah, it's like, let's do that. Like, there's not enough black characters leading comics. So he came out with Spawn, and Al Simmons, the main character, was black. He's like, fuck what the industry says. I'm going to do it my way. Same thing with the big two. He's like, I'm not getting what I want at the big two. Fuck it. I'm going to help found a company. Even when it came to animation, when he wanted, like, everyone else was doing Saturday morning cartoons, and he's like, well, Spawn can't be a Saturday morning cartoon. I don't want them to give him a talking dog. And like, he's like, no, we're not doing that. So he scoured around, and he eventually made a deal with HBO, and he's like, no, we're going to do an R-rated made for adults cartoon that is going to deviate from the comic book, even because it's going to go so much darker than the comic. So it's like the comic is meant for the teens, the show is meant for the adults, the toys are meant for the kids. Like, he just, exactly. I don't know. I've always admired that about him.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And like I said, we could go on and on. I got stories about, but anyway, so Spider-Man, even the look of Spider-Man in the 90s was really influenced by Todd McFarlane, right? To segue back into Spider-Man. He really popularized the big eye look for Spider-Man. He made the eye holes on his costume a lot larger than they had historically been. And like I said, I mentioned the spaghetti webbing, because he would draw the webs not just as like little strings or ropes coming out of Spider-Man's wrist, but they would like twist and turn and tangle, and they looked like cobwebs, but they were like gooey and sticky looking, and I don't think that they've ever looked better. And yeah, people pretty much always draw the webbing in that way. Like, he changed the design permanently. But anyway, so 1995, 1996, maybe. We have Spider-Man, James Cameron, big budget. Let's talk about who we can get in our cast. And I know it's a big budget movie, but it's also a comic book movie, and it's the 90s. So
Right.
I don't know that you're gonna get A-list stars.
Hmm.
I think we could get a lot of like B-list guys or a lot of like working actors, maybe a couple of faces that would have been big in the 90s. So I did my fan cast, and I wasn't really sure who all to cast
Hmm.
because Spider-Man has he has a huge rogues gallery,
Right.
all kinds of villains, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time like casting villains because we haven't made up a story for it yet.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I have this one idea that I think would be cool with this one villain, so I'm going to focus on him, and then we'll see how it plays out when we get to that part. And for the rest of the cast, I tried to stick to Peter Parker himself and the supporting cast.
Okay.
And I'll say anyone who's listening to this, I'm assuming that you've seen one of the 8 Spider-Man movies or read any of the comics or any of the cartoons or any of this stuff. So I don't think we need to stop and explain who the characters are necessarily. You
No.
know, I think everyone should probably know who they are. Everyone that I'm going to mention has been in at least one of the movies, with one exception that I'll explain.
Um. Yeah. Same. Actually, looking at all mine, same. I did not go with B list. I was just like, I kind of did the whole like, yeah, fuck it. If we had infinite money, fan cast,
Good.
So yeah, so I have a lot of A listers on here, like 1 or 2 B listers, but
Well, this is good because this is what, honestly, like the thing I like the best, and part of why I wanted to do this episode as a fun one to follow up aliens, because I'm like, the plot's not going to be that hard. You got to do the origin story, and then you got to have a villain. Like
yeah.
it will be fine. We'll get to that. But I like the fan cast. We did this for GI Joe and for Masters of the Universe, and it was always a good time. So
Mhm.
let's jump right in. I've been talking a lot, so you tell me. Do we want to start with Peter Parker right off the bat, or do
Yeah.
you want to save the good one and do the supporting cast first?
I say let's start at the top. Who's our star? I'll be honest, I really liked Wizard's pick for this one.
Really?
Yeah, no, I'm a huge John Cusack fan. I love John Cusack. In fact, even movies that people hate that he's done, like The Cell, I actually like because, or I'm sorry, just Cell. The Cell was with what's her name, J-Lo.
J-Lo, yeah.
Yeah, Cell, based on the Stephen King novel. I hate the way it ends, but man, I love the movie up to when it ends. And a
Okay.
lot of that is John Cusack and Sam Jackson. But no, I've always loved John Cusack, and in 1995 he was only 28, so he
Yeah.
was young enough to play like a college age Peter Parker.
Okay, that's interesting. I did not like that as a pick from the Wizard article. I will say I love John Cusack. Absolutely love John Cusack. He's my favorite like leading man from those like raunchy teen comedy movies. And oh my god, like fucking was it One Hot Summer and Better Off Dead? And man, I can't.
One crazy summer.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yep.
One,
Yep.
one
It
crazy.
took me a second. I was like, wait a
Yeah,
second.
I'm like, what is One Hot Summer? That's some album.
You're thinking of Wet Hot American Summer.
Yeah. Yes. Love One Crazy Summer. I love, Better Off Dead. I love Say Anything. But also I might put High Fidelity in top 10 or 15 movies of all time.
Oh, I fucking love that movie.
I think I might have, and it's certainly one of the movies that I have seen the most times in my life. Christina, my wife, and I, we watch it pretty much all the time still to this day. It's like whenever we want to put a comfort movie on, it's like that or like The Big Lebowski, and we just let it go. And every time it is funny. Every joke is just as funny as it was the last time we saw it. It is such a genius movie.
Oh, it so is.
So go ahead.
I'll say real quick, for anyone who hasn't watched High Fidelity, just fucking watch it, because it does the thing that doesn't happen often enough in rom-coms, in my opinion, where the main character, even though they're like, oh, this is all happening to me, you see that they're kind of a dick making their own bed that they're forced to lie in. Absolutely. And I fucking love that about that movie.
Absolutely. Yeah. John Cusack's character Rob is like such an unreliable narrator, because you're listening to him whine and then you're watching him, just make mistake after mistake after
Mhm.
mistake, and it's like, dude, stop it.
So
And
good.
this doesn't need to be like the High Fidelity Hour, but it's also an example of a movie that is way better than the book that it's based on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't even know that it's based on the book. Actually, Christina, even though we've seen the movie 100 times, I just told her this past week, and she was like, "Wait, what? It's based on a book?" Yeah, and it's by Nick Hornby, the
Yeah.
guy who wrote like Fever Pitch and About a Boy and some other stuff. And here's a fun piece of trivia too about High Fidelity: is the reason that Jack Black is in the movie is
Mhm.
because John Cusack was a big fan of Tenacious D,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, and because back at that time they were still like a comedy musical act, really focused more on the comedy than on the music, in like a Bo
Mhm.
Burnham kind of a way, where like the music is amazing, but also like they're stand-up comedians.
Yep.
Um, and they had done some of their HBO shorts at that point, but their career wasn't really blowing up. But yeah, John Cusack and Dave Grohl were huge fans of the band
Mhm.
and kept trying to like find places to put them in stuff, which is why they're in that like Learn to Fly video by the Foo Fighters. But yeah, John Cusack cast Jack Black as I forget the character's name, and if you read the book, the character in the book is very similar. Like he's
Mhm.
this ridiculous man child, and John Cusack was just like, oh yeah, that's Jack Black, and then and then
Yep.
just like spun him up and let him go.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And yeah, and
Anyway,
I have read the book, and it's nowhere near as good.
no, not. And I think Rob is maybe more of an asshole in the book than even in the
Oh,
movie.
big
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. It's pretty terrible. And as I'm talking about John Cusack, a Being John Malkovich ad came up on IMDb, and I'm like, God damn, I love that movie too.
Mhm.
Anyway, but I say all that to say I don't know. I could see him as Peter Parker. I could see him in the role. I don't know that he'd be my first choice. I think his nebbishness fits,
Mhm.
but I don't know that he has the like witty banter, repartee aspect of Spider-Man. It's the same problem I had with Tobey Maguire. He was a perfect Peter Parker, but
Mhm.
listening to him try to have like witty banter with the villains was like, it doesn't really work for me. Like Tobey Maguire he's still probably my favorite Spider-Man ever,
Mhm.
but he didn't have the Tom Holland like gift of gab. Uh,
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
I went with someone younger too, because I definitely think a 29-year-old could pull off, you know, in the role of Spider-Man, even if it was trying to pretend to be, as young as high school. But I was actually thinking of high school, because I'm thinking
Mm.
this is the era of like 90210 and Melrose Place and stuff like that. So I was thinking, let's go younger. And also, I wasn't thinking A-list, so I couldn't decide. I couldn't decide between Jonathan Brandis from Sequest 2032 and
Oh gosh.
Ladybugs.
Wow, yeah, okay, yeah, I can see that.
Because for me, I thought of him as he's a great Peter Parker, but
Mm.
then I also was like, yeah, but there's also like Mark Paul Gosselaar from Saved by the Bell, who I think would make a great Spider-Man. You know, so yeah, I was like, I don't know, I couldn't decide between the two, like the nerdy character or like the tough guy, hero character. So I don't know.
See, I
I
feel like
like,
Mark Paul Gosselaar would make a better Flash Thompson than Peter Parker.
yeah, he probably would. I like my Flash Thompson pick, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
again, I went A-list, so I'm kind of definitely on a different level with the casting here.
okay.
I wasn't even thinking high school. I honestly, like, story wise, because like I said at the start, I didn't really come up with much of a story, just kind of story beats.
Hmm.
And story wise, I was thinking, okay, origin stories are annoying. Like, we get to a point where it's like all of these characters, we know their origin, so it's like, how can we wrap it up succinctly? So
Hmm.
the way I was thinking is like, what was becoming big in the 90s was cold openings, where
Yeah.
it's like we do that thing where it's like, bam, just jump right into the action and then soft pedal a little bit. So I figured we would do this thing where it's like we have like a mini villain fight at the start of the movie. Totally, if Spider-Man beat the shit out of a villain, wrap him up for the cops kind of thing, almost like they did in Ninja Turtles, where it's like
Sure.
April gets attacked and then it's like the turtles beat the hell out of him, but we still don't really see the heroes type of thing.
Hmm.
And then we see Peter Parker in college, like he's maybe like, I don't know, I don't want to say like a senior in college, but he's been at college for a while. And then like we get like a soft moment where it's like him remembering maybe a dream sequence or whatever, and remembering the death of Uncle Ben and kind of what spurred it on and all that, just so you could kind of like quickly get the origin in there and not spend a lot of time on it like they did in the first Spider-Man movie and the first Amazing Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it gets old after a while. I like the fact with the MCU Spider-Man, they didn't really do that. They were just like, the story already. Like, yeah, we'll
Yeah.
mention it, but you know it already, so fucking move on.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was coming from, was like a college age cast. But so we're definitely going to have some differences in our ages here.
Okay, no, I think we can compromise though. I think this is fine. So I'll say this. Let's go college age. I like your idea actually. And as I'm looking at my cast and I'm thinking about this one idea that I had, like I think it works. So I
Okay.
agree. Let's do that. Let's go with John Cusack. We'll go with like the college age, and we'll pretend John Cusack's 5 or 6 years younger than he really is,
Right.
and right, which that's normal in Hollywood. And
Hmm.
then I do still think we should do an origin story because, again, all those other Spider-Man movies don't exist yet, and
Right.
I think a lot of people would have known the origin, but just like with Sam Raimi, you kind of have to put it out there at the beginning. And I think I like Sam Raimi's approach because the whole movie was the origin story, and he really took his time with it in a very like Brian Michael Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man kind of way.
Hmm.
But I think we can do the origin, but to your point, maybe not as a cold open, but we can do it quickly. It's not
Right.
that hard of a story to tell, right? So let's pause for a second. The story beats of the origin story are, Spider-Man encounters a mutated spider of some, whether it's radioactive or genetically engineered, whatever. He
Hmm.
encounters this spider that that bites him. He gets sick, wakes up, has spider powers, and then he doesn't know what to do about that. His uncle Ben is killed in by a robber that turns out Peter could have stopped because he had been a witness to that robber committing a crime previously, and so then he feels this overwhelming guilt to like do something good with his life, and now he has to support his like widowed Aunt May, and he tries to use his powers to make money, but this like little Uncle Ben voice in his head doesn't really let him stop trying to like help people and to atone for the mistake that he made by letting his uncle die. Right? I mean,
Right.
so I just explained it in like a minute, and I think we could hit all of that without really spending a lot of time with Uncle Ben or with Aunt May or with any of these characters. We don't have to spend a lot of time with them, right? Um, and I think if we the rest of the cast, like if we do a Flash, if we do a Harry or whatever, we can introduce them later, not like Sam Raimi did it in the 2002 Spider-Man,
Hmm.
where it's like you have this whole cast, you get to know Peter Parker, and then you put him through this traumatic event. Instead, we just start with Peter Parker, like that he's the only one we know. We see the traumatic event, he gets spider powers, and then we see how he's dealing with that, and that's when we get to meet his like friends at college or whatever. You know
Right.
what I mean? It kind of make it go backwards, and that way we can get him the powers quickly, and kind of get through it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Okay, so we'll circle back to the plot in a little bit and like nail down exactly like why with the spider, the whole thing. Let's get back to the cast before we spend too much time on this. We're already pretty far into the recording, so um, I'll throw one out. Let's throw an odd one out. Let's have the robber. I think the robber or the
Mhm.
guy that kills Uncle Ben should be in the movie. We should do that scene, and I think it should be Steve Buscemi.
Dude, I have the same fucking thing. 100%. Like, seriously,
Yes, I love it.
that's hilarious. I literally have the Robert, Steve Buscemi. That's hilarious.
Yeah, Robert, Steve Buscemi. That's it.
Oh my god, I love it.
Oh god.
So yeah,
All
that's done.
right. All right, back to you. Who do you want to do next?
Um, let's go with Aunt May. She's
Okay.
in everything. I put Betty White.
Oh, see, Betty White's a good one. I like Betty White. So in that same like generation or age,
Mhm.
I went with Emergency Road Connection, and I went just Angela Lansbury. Why not?
Oh,
Right?
yeah, no, I like her.
I I thought if we wanted to go younger, I also did like if we wanted to go younger, I really like Melinda Dillon, the mom from A Christmas Story, who's also in Close
Yeah.
Encounters of the Third Kind, and like it sucks to have to always have her like in these mom roles, but man, she'd be a really good like mothering Aunt May.
Yeah, no,
Um,
she would be.
but since
See,
we're going with an older John Cusack, maybe we go with the older Aunt May.
I was thinking the reason I thought Betty White is I was thinking of her character on Golden Girls, and it's like she always had like the little zingers, but she also seemed kind of oblivious to everything. And
Yeah.
if you look at the Aunt May in the comic books and cartoons, there's like so many signs that Peter is Spider-Man, and she's just like, "I'm gonna make you eat cakes." It's like
Yeah.
totally oblivious. So I was like, what actress can play oblivious while still being charming and lovable? I was like, fucking Betty White, of course.
Hell
Like,
yeah. You know what? That can even also be like a plot point to add a little pathos to the story. What if like Peter Parker, the John Cusack Peter Parker, what if he knows that his Aunt May is maybe like a little bit like on the Alzheimer like spectrum, you know, a little
mhm.
bit like she's getting a little senile, and now that like Uncle Ben is gone, he has to take care of her because he knows I can't really leave her by herself because, you know, one day
Oh
she might,
yeah,
you know what I mean? One day she might not be all there, you know what I mean?
yeah. No, I like that. That
That,
makes sense.
that's like a new thing that isn't in the comic, but you know, it's the 90s. We got to change some shit. So, okay.
Yeah,
I still like Angela Lansbury, but yeah, I think Betty White's a good choice.
I do love Angela Lansbury. You know, I have a soft spot for her. She was awesome.
She is awesome. Okay, we'll go with Betty White. So, Betty White would be married to Uncle Ben. And again, I went with a younger Uncle Ben and I went with an older Uncle Ben. I think they're both really great. But if we're going to go older Uncle Ben married to Betty White, I say it's Jack Lemmon.
Oh, that's perfect. That's fucking perfect. Yeah, no, I like that.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, just think about him in Grumpy Old Men and Glengarry Glen Ross and
yeah,
yeah.
he's
And
always.
then
Oh, he was so good.
and I could see him being, you know, he's a dad figure. He's the kind of guy that's really when he gives you advice, like that's you're gonna remember that forever. Like he's gonna
Yep.
deliver that you know responsibility power line so perfectly. You know.
Hmm. See, now I went younger because I figured this would take place like several years after the origin. Because you figure if it was in high school that he got bit, and that's when Uncle Ben died, and then this would take place, 8 or 9 years later, um,
Mhm.
toward the end of his college career type of thing. Um, I went young thinking like a young guy playing an older man. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like kind of age him up a little bit. And the only reason I did it is because I love this guy and in a dad role is Clu Gulliger.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He's really
And
good though too.
because of his role as Jesse's dad in Nightmare 2, like
Yep.
I know I mentioned it on that episode of the Boogeyman's Closet, is it's like there's that moment where he's so worried about his son and he's like,
Mhm.
I don't care what you're on or like, he's like, I don't care what's that. Just all I want to know is what you're taking and who are you getting it from. And he's like, there's that moment, like you can tell he's angry, but he's more scared about what's happening to his son. And
Mhm.
he plays that dad role so fucking good in that movie. And I just have a soft spot for Clu Gulliger. Like everything I see him and I enjoy the guy. But yeah, I really like Jack Lemmon. That's a really good pick.
All right. Sweet. Okay. So we got John Cusack. We got Betty White. We got Jack Lemmon. Oh, you know, I probably should be writing this down.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're next, I think. Who do you want to go to next? Who's next on your list?
Mary Jane Watson,
Okay.
who I picked Julianne Moore.
Oh, that's so good. And for the time period too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking. 1995 Julianne Moore. Like, first of all, I had a huge crush on her as a teenager. Um, like, I just thought she was so damn pretty, and she's a great actress. Like, she's so good in everything.
Yeah, she's amazing. I love her. I have always loved her. Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. She definitely has the hair. Okay, so again, I went young. I didn't do an actor that was closer to Cusack's age. I was thinking teeny bopper, so I went with Claire Danes, right? Who would have been
Oh yeah.
coming off of My So-Called Life. This would have
Hmm.
been before the Romeo and Juliet, but yeah, she would have been good. But no, I like Julianne Moore. I think Julianne Moore and John Cusack would make a cute couple.
Yeah, I think that they work together. So
Okay.
who's the next for you?
Who's next? Okay, I mentioned Flash Thompson, and again, because I went younger, I'm like, I don't know. Now I'm like kind of doubting my pick, but I still think it would be a good pick. I think a 90210. Flash Thompson is like, he's the big man on campus. He's the bully, but then he kind of has a heart of gold eventually in the comics. Like he eventually becomes Peter Parker's like best friend. So I went with, and I will pronounce the name the way that he pronounces it, which is Ian Ziering.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, I think he's perfect.
You know what? I have to agree. I like, and I even think in this age bracket, I still think it works because he was older in 90210. So I think playing around with like this 1995 like college age cast, I think that still works for Flash Thompson.
Oh yeah. Damn, he was born in 1964. Shit, he would have already been like 30, 31.
That's
Damn.
what I'm saying. Like he was old. I honestly went with Brad Pitt.
Okay, nice.
Because I was thinking mid 90s Brad Pitt. He was still doing the heartthrob thing, but he was also cut like a motherfucker. And I feel like he could play the bully role, but also kind of be like the charming asshole that everyone still kind of loves.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
but I like Ian Ziering better. Like that's good.
Thanks. Yeah, I love that. That's one of the first ones I thought of actually, where I was like, like what do I do with like a 90210 Melrose Place cast? And the first thing I thought was, Ian Ziering's an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Like that is kind of perfect.
Okay. So I'm gonna just go ahead and say my Harry Osborn choice doesn't work at all anymore. So I will leave that to you. But I'm gonna go with one on my turn now, and I will go with let's go with J. Jonah Jameson. So I had two. Now I really like the pick from the Wizard article, which is Michael Douglas. The falling down era of Michael Douglas, I think would be perfect. Grow a little mustache, have that same kind of crew cut haircut he had in Falling Down. Awesome. Yeah, but at the same time, it's the 90s. They're going to make some changes, and there's going to be some changes that are like, wait, that guy? But just thinking of the voice, the attitude, the kind of guy he would take him seriously, but at the same time also realize he's kind of ridiculous, and he would look funny with a mustache, is Lane Smith, right? My Cousin Vinny, he's the dad and son-in-law, right? He was the lawyer for the prosecution in My Cousin Vinny.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. I forgot about this guy.
I'm trying to think, what else is he in? I think that those are probably his like two big movies. I always think of him as the guy from Son-in-Law.
Yeah, no, I can absolutely see that. Okay, see, I agreed with Wizard. I was like, Michael Douglas is a great fit for that. But no, this guy's good.
I'm still down for it, but I kept trying to stick Lane Smith in there somewhere. I don't know why, but I'm just like, he just screams 90s like villain to me,
Yeah.
But I don't know if any of the Rogues Gallery villains work for him. So I was like, maybe he could be, hell, he could be Uncle Ben, but I kind of like him more as an asshole.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, honestly, you know who else would fit now that I'm thinking about it, is John Malkovich.
Oh yeah, he would.
Because he can do that, like the quiet, sarcastic asshole, and he can freak out really well. So,
yeah, I feel like he could be good for really any of the Spider-Man's villains. Like, he would be a good, like, Electro, for example. Like, you don't really care what Electro looks like. You just want someone who's kind of sadistic, but also kind of silly.
Actually, you know what? Put him in a bulky suit and have him Kingpin.
Oh yeah.
Like he could deliver the villain monologue perfectly.
Yeah, and again, it would be that weird 90s change of like, why is the Kingpin skinny?
Yeah, exactly. He's just this tall guy. What's going on?
What's going on with that?
Yeah,
I could see that.
Could see Lane Smith as J. Jonah. Okay, I like that.
But you had Michael Douglas. Wizard had Michael Douglas. I think Michael Douglas is good, and yeah, hearing him yell at people is awesome.
Because it's that whole Falling Down era, and I'm like, yeah, I could see him with the buzz cut, because he had the buzz cut and Falling Down. Just grow the little mustache and have him pounding his fist on a table a lot. Like I think it works.
Yeah, I definitely agree for sure. All right, so we'll go with Michael Douglas. All right, so
Well,
go
oh,
ahead.
I was gonna say, well, since we're at the Daily Bugle, let's wrap up the Daily Bugle players.
Hmm.
Robbie Robertson, I think Denzel Washington.
I think so too. That's a good pick. I actually went with the Wizard pick for this one too. I think Robert Guillaume is a great pick
He
for
really
this one.
is.
Yeah, he was famous at the time as Benson, and he's the the voice of Rafiki in The Lion King. You
Yep.
know.
But I don't know. I feel like 95 Denzel was just fucking kicking ass and taking names. Like
He
he was so
was,
good.
and he was really big at the time too. And him being like, sort of a voice of reason to Michael Douglas's, raving Jay Jonah would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah. Like imagine the two of them playing off one another. I feel like that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, there'd be some good drama there. I didn't have anybody else from the Daily Bugle office. I didn't do like Betty Brant or anybody.
Oh, see, I did Betty Brant. I picked Winona Ryder. I was like,
Oh,
it's 95. Of course she's in this movie.
yes. And especially since and in the comics, Betty Brant and Peter Parker dated for a while. In the movies, there was always like this, like it was a mutual crush there, but they never did anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Betty Brant obviously thought Peter Parker was cute, so yeah, it would be a fun like cameo or small role for Winona at the
Right.
time. Okay, all right. So like I said, I gotta next time around. Tell me who you want for Harry Osborn, because my pick doesn't really work anymore. But I will, since it's my turn, I'll go on the next one. And I know we already cast Mary Jane,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm gonna cast Gwen Stacy too. And
Oh, okay.
I think Gwen Stacy in the mid '90s, like you want sort of a classic beauty, but I think you don't need Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane to look the same. And if they're both going to be in the movie, if they are, I think you go for a different look for Gwen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went Drew Barrymore.
Oh, okay.
I think that she's like the fun-loving like girl next door type, And I think that that's kind of what Gwen was in the comics originally.
Yeah.
And then Mary Jane was like the brash model. She was the one who was pulling Peter out of his comfort zone, and she was the wild child and like partying and going clubbing. But Gwen Stacy was like, she was like the goody little two shoes like cop's daughter. And I think Drew
Yeah.
Barrymore is better with that girl next door thing.
You know what? Yeah, you're 100% right, because I didn't even think about Gwen Stacy, but the first person that came to mind when you mentioned her, why can't I think of her fucking name? She was in the main chick from There's Something About Mary.
Cameron Diaz.
Cameron Diaz, thank you. That was the first person that
Yeah.
popped into my head when you said the character. But I like Drew Barrymore. That's a good one.
I do like Cameron Diaz. I agree, but yeah, I want to go with, and I think Drew Barrymore and John Cusack are cute together.
Yeah, I think that totally works. I love Drew Barrymore, so that's a good pick.
And again, it's the '90s. They'll stick her in anything,
Oh yeah, and
So-
and of course she'll put butts in seats. So
Yeah, for sure.
All
right, go ahead.
So Norman Osborn.
Okay,
I want to do this one first, but
sure.
Norman Osborn, I picked Gary Oldman.
Oh, that's so good. Damn, that's really good.
I was trying to find someone that was just old enough to be like, maybe he could have a kid that was, college age.
Mhm.
It's kind of ridiculous because he's only I think 14 or 15 years older than John Cusack, something like that. So he's
Yeah.
I mean, we're really playing with the timeline, but Gary Oldman has proven time and time again he can act behind makeup, he can act, without makeup. So it's like he could do both Norman and the Green Goblin really fucking well. I can, because you throw him in a bunch of makeup, he can still emote.
Yeah,
So-
that's true. And so I picked another actor for similar reasons, because I was thinking, who would be a scary Green Goblin and be really over the top and theatrical, like the one in the comics with like the circus costume on, Halloween costume, and yet still be fucking creepy in the boardroom as like this, corporate guy. And so I went with John Lithgow.
Oh wow. Oh, I like that. Because I love John Lithgow as a bad guy. That oh god, what is that movie that he's in where he's fucking Raising Cain? He's fucking terrifying in that.
He is, and he was in Cliffhanger too. He was a good villain, but I think of him from fucking Santa Claus the movie.
Right. Exactly.
But he plays a good villain,
Shit.
and he's also he has that like crazy smile, crazy laugh. He's got like a Willem Dafoe, Jack Nicholson kind of thing going on, where he's like unhinged when he's like laughing, you know?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna put John Lithgow down here, and I'm gonna move my Gary Oldman pick to replace somebody else
Okay.
that I was kind of like, it works, but he's gonna be a side character if he's even used. But yeah, no, I think Gary Oldman might be a better fit for another character. But okay, so yeah,
Okay.
John Lithgow. Let's go with him.
Okay. I love it.
So for Harry, I picked Edward Norton.
Oh, see, I'm so glad you said that, because Edward Norton I had on my list of like question mark, like I want to put him somewhere, but I don't know where. And since we went older, my Jason Priestley pick didn't really work anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we had have gone younger, Jason Priestley would have been in here somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. No, I like Edward Norton. That works perfectly. I'm down for that.
I say, because picture him in like Death to Smoochie, like how goofy and fun loving he was, and how Harry could kind of switch from like, that fun loving guy to fucking psychopath, and then picture him in American History X, and it's like, yeah, Edward Norton has the chops.
He does. And that was his whole character in Primal Fear. That was his like breakout movie in 1996.
That's
the
true.
The whole point of that character was that you believed him as this like victim, of the system, who turned out to really be playing the system because he was secretly like this mastermind, and he was scary as fuck. Yeah.
No, I think he'd be good there. So
okay,
now
perfect.
What are your other characters?
So I did Captain Stacy as well, Gwen Stacy's dad, right? Who was what's his first name? I don't even know, but he's the police captain,
right?
And so he was in the one of those Garfield movies. It's escaping me now. No, he was in the third Raimi movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
Shit, I can't even remember. But yeah, no, I just went with James Cromwell. I think James Cromwell, he played the character in Spider-Man 3, and I think he would have played the character perfectly a few years prior to that. So I'm just sticking with James Cromwell, from Revenge of the Nerds and Babe and Green Mile.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's perfect. I and plus he's a great actor.
Yeah, and I tried to avoid people who like actually did get cast, but
right.
Like I just picture him in the Green Mile, and I'm like, that's him. That's just him.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot.
So it's your turn, but in terms of like what I have on my list that we haven't done yet, I only have villains left.
Same. I have questionable villains and two particular ones, but still have villains nonetheless. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left.
Okay, perfect. Oh, you know what? I was just thinking was, shit, man, didn't Clancy Brown play Captain Stacy too?
I don't know, but he would be good because I fucking love Clancy Brown.
Yeah, me too. Fuck, hang on, I gotta Google it real quick because I'm terrible with those Garfield. I didn't. Then no, he wasn't in the movie. He played it in. He voiced the character on one of the cartoons on the. I think it's the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon. I'm changing my pick from James Cromwell. Let's go with
Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown, hell yeah.
Mr. Krabs himself.
Mr. Byron Hadley, Captain of the Guards. So I'm sorry. I interrupted you. You were saying.
No. I think he's perfect. No, I have 6 villains left. So I don't know if we have any same characters on the list. And again, I don't even know if we're going to use any of these guys. But of course, it was the 90s, so symbiote madness. Eddie Brock, I picked Dolph Lundgren.
I had Dolph Lundgren was also on my list for a maybe for a different character, but no,
okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, I only had him down as a maybe because I'm like he was already the Punisher. Like should he play somebody else?
Right.
But I don't think it would have mattered. No, he'd be a good Eddie Brock.
Well, because I just figured like picture him in Universal Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And he really wouldn't have to do much acting. All he would have to do as Eddie Brock is like get pissed off that like Peter had better photos than him. Show him like and maybe even have a scene in the movie where it's like he gets some photos of Spider-Man like beating the hell out of some guys at like a convenience store that were trying to rob it. But the way he's framing it is like, oh, look, Spider-Man's doing some villainous shit again. I'm going to sell this to Jonah, but of course Peter already had his camera set up, so he's got better photos of him taking down the criminals that were clearly holding up this place. So Eddie is shamed into thinking like, oh, I fucked up. Doing the whole thing where like giving him a reason to hate Peter Parker.
For sure.
But yeah, I mean, you just have to be a muscly badass, really.
Yeah, that's all you need. No, that's perfect. I think that's a really, really good pick. Even thinking of him as Venom is like, duh, shit, I should have thought of that.
Well, see, now, did you have a Cletus Cassidy?
I did not. I didn't. I only did Dr. Octopus, Lizard, Scorpion, and Kraven.
Okay, see, I went Venom, Carnage, Octopus, Lizard, Mysterio, and Kingpin.
Okay, all right. So you went Eddie Brock. I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you my Scorpion. And I wasn't thinking of the new Carnage movie. I was just thinking that that dude's creepy as fuck. But I would have picked Woody Harrelson as
Carnage.
Scorpion.
Scorpion. Yeah, I put him as Carnage because I'm like, especially in '95, that's like Natural Born Killers era. Woody Harrelson, like, fuck yeah, that's the whole reason he needed to be Cletus Cassidy. But a younger Woody Harrelson would have been even better.
Yeah, you're right. And that's actually why I was thinking of him as Scorpion, because it was in the 90s that we first started seeing Scorpion, his personality being changed to being more and more like unhinged,
Yeah.
And he was always this sort of like stupid bank robber, but they really leaned into him being kind of crazy, in the 90s. And it got even worse eventually, to the point where he was even Venom for a long time in the comics because he was fucked up.
That's true.
But I do like Woody. I do think that Woody Harrelson as both Cletus and Carnage is, especially in the 90s. Yeah. It's hard to argue with that. That's pretty perfect.
But I mean, who else would play a good Mac Gargan?
So I will take a pick that I had for somebody else and move it here. I'm going to go with Everett McGill, Twin Peaks, the people on the stairs.
Oh, fuck yes. Dude, I love that guy.
Talk about fucking unhinged, right?
Yeah, I love that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, I love it.
That's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. All right, so your turn again. Who's next?
Okay, so I'll give you the switch that I had. So for originally Dr. Kurt Connors,
okay,
I had Kevin Costner.
Okay.
And that's what I was like, you know what? Because 90s Kevin Costner, I liked him. He can clearly carry a film on his fucking shoulders, which we saw with like The Postman and other movies. Like he's got no problem being able to do that. But he also can play like crazy if we need him to. But this is where I was like, you know what? Move Gary Oldman. Have Gary Oldman be Kurt Connors.
I really like that. So I had William Sadler as the Lizard.
I love William Sadler.
For the same, exactly, right? And he had like Demon Knight and shit at the time, and he was in Shawshank, so he was coming off of some shit. But I like him for the same reasons, because he can play very serious, very scary, like in Die Hard 2, right? Even though that's kind of a silly movie, like he was pretty intense.
Right.
But I can also see him like in the makeup, man, he would look awesome. Like if they gave him, if they didn't do like a lizard mask or CGI, like if he was just like, they put some scales on his face, like he could act through the makeup, I think, just like Gary Oldman could.
Yeah. I think either one of those are good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Spider-Man has so many villains, and it's like, wait, what's another animal-themed, unhinged Spider-Man villain? And it's like, there's probably a bunch of them,
I mean, I'm trying to think like villains of the 90s.
Or like a Vulture is usually an older guy, right? And fucking, Michael Keaton played it perfectly as a somewhat younger character. But like Gary Oldman as the Vulture would be pretty fucking cool. Or I don't know who you did for Mysterio, but like either one of those guys would make a good Mysterio.
I think Gary Oldman as the Vulture would be fun. Yeah, fuck it. Okay, so we'll go. Lizard is William Sadler, and let's put the Vulture.
What's funny is that most of these characters aren't even going to end up in our movie. It's just fun to do. It's just fun to do this.
Well, now for Doc Ock, I agreed with Wizard. I said
Me too.
Larry Drake. I mean, come on.
Dr. Giggles. Come on.
Especially in the 90s. Like, that's perfect.
It is.
That's so good.
And you know what? I never knew this. I am a gigantic fan of the Karate Kid. franchise with Cobra Kai, especially the first three movies. Like, I love Karate Kid. I never realized until right before we started recording that fucking Larry Drake is in Karate Kid. I had no idea.
He is?
He is. I know, right? Exactly. So if you remember Karate Kid, there's the scene at the beach where Daniel is like learning balance in the waves, and he sees Mr. Miyagi doing the crane kick for the very first time on the post on the
Yeah.
and then they walk back to the car, and there's two guys there drinking beers on Mr. Miyagi's car, and Mr. Miyagi says, like, he points to the beer bottles, and he's like, please move or whatever, and then some guy like burps, puts it down, and was like, move him yourself, Mr. Moto, and that was fucking Larry Drake.
That's funny as hell.
Right, and then Mr. Miyagi like chops the tops of the bottles off, and they get all scared and like run away with their broken glass, and I'm like, that's so crazy. Anyway, weird. Just for us Dr. Giggles and Darkman fans, it's like, oh, that's awesome.
You know what I just thought of? We were talking about Scorpion, like who could play Unhinged, and fucking Muscle Cheeks.
Oh yeah. No, dude, he should play the fucking kangaroo.
Yes. Something even weirder. Oh, good old Muscle Cheeks.
Okay. So we did Doc Ock, we did Lizard, we did Vulture, Scorpion, Kingpin, Eddie Brock, Carnage. You said you had Mysterio. Who was your Mysterio?
Yeah. Tim Roth.
Oh, dude. See, we're on the same page, because I had Tim Roth on my like question mark, where do I put him list.
I just pictured him like, because again, he wasn't super well known at the time. Like, he was popular, but he was also doing a lot of movies where he was in makeup, or he was just like, kind of a supporting character. Really wasn't until like his career with Tarantino really took off.
Yeah.
With Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, that it was like people started to take notice, like, this guy's really good. But at that point, he was doing little roles. Like Four Rooms, I think, was his biggest role up until Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah. And at this point, if he makes the cut for our like 95, 96 movie, he would have been coming off of Tarantino, and he would have been looking for like bigger roles. So yeah, that'd be awesome.
But yeah, I just picture him like being able to give those villainous soliloquies. Like,
yes, definitely. Okay, so I am going to segue my last cast. Sorry, do you have anyone else?
Nope. That's
okay,
it.
So I have one more, and I'm saving it for the end, because I want to segue it into the idea that I had that I think would be a good plot. And because I don't want to just repeat a movie that we've already seen, because yes, in 1995, none of the Sam Raimi or none of the movies existed, right? None of the Tobey Maguires or the Andrew Garfields or Tom Holland movies existed. But at the same time, I don't want to sit here and be like, hey, let's improv a story where like, the Green Goblin, goes crazy and tries to kill Spider-Man, because like we've all seen that, and not only in the comics but also in the movie. So I was like, how do we come up with our own idea for like a villain we haven't really seen on the big screen yet, or a story we haven't seen at least, and yet make it work for the 90s, where it wouldn't have been a weird pick, where it's kind of like when The Dark Knight came out and they went with like Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow. Now in and of itself, it works in the story, but the real reason they went with those characters is because in this other universe we had already seen the Joker and the Riddler and Two-Face and all the big name villains, right? So they had to pick somebody else, and they really made it work. And that's kind of what I want to go with. Like, pick not the first choice for your villain, not Doc Ock, not Green Goblin. I say we go with Kraven the Hunter, and we have fucking Mel Gibson play Kraven the Hunter.
Oh, that's fucking perfect.
With his Australian accent, and it would be like a Crocodile Dundee, but not goofy, but like fucking scary, like like fucking Crocmaster, Naugahyde, but like a like a actual hunter, like these big game hunters we talked about, who's famous for like, I will hunt and kill fucking anything, any weapon, bare hands, whatever, any place, anywhere in the world. And we have our Kraven, and he's like a celebrity, right? He has like a TV show or something. Maybe not a TV show, because reality TV wasn't really much of a thing at this point, but people would have known who this guy is. He would at least been in the
Right.
newspaper of like, Craven the Hunter does it again. He catches a 30-foot anaconda with his bare hands, or whatever.
Right. He would have been on like the cover of like People or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and of course, a lot of people would have hated him. A lot of animal rights activists and and naturalists would have. This guy's like their worst enemy. So I think I love Mel Gibson. I love crazy, evil Mel Gibson.
Same.
Okay. So let's get into the plot. So, in the interest of trying to get through the origin story quickly, while incorporating as much as we can, as quickly as we can, I say let's tie the robber story where Steve Buscemi's character, steals something, gets away with it. Peter Parker doesn't stop him. And then later on, he kills Uncle Ben. Now Peter Parker feels terrible. So we combine that with the spider bite origin story. And we have it that I always like Peter Parker as a photographer. Like, yeah, he's a scientist, sure. But I like photographer Peter Parker personally.
Right.
And I think it's more believable for like a 90s movie.
Okay.
So I'm just going to quickly throw out this, and then we can we can flesh it out. So I'm thinking we have John Cusack. He's at this college. There's this, they're having this, we open up with like, oh, it's the opening of this, they're making a research announcement or an expo where they're going to show, hey, we've identified this hybrid spider. I don't know if they found it like in arachnophobia or if they made it, but the point is they had this like weird mutant spider and they've done some research on it, and holy shit, like it's super strong and super fast and it's like this crazy super spider, and we're finally ready to like show it off to the public. And so Peter Parker, who is at the college, maybe he works for the paper and he's going to go and be the photographer at like the big opening, the big expo. And yet at the same time, Steve Buscemi, we just see him like sneaking in kind of in the background, and he's going to steal the spider because he has like somebody who wants to buy it, some evil industrialist, who wants to buy the super spider so they can extract its secrets or whatever. And, because of course at the university it's research. So it's like, it's public funding or it's like university funding. So, they're not there to make money. They're like, look at this amazing thing we found. It's like a breakthrough in pharmaceuticals or whatever. Right. And then of course the evil corporation in the 90s, everything was an evil corporation in the 90s, right?
Right.
It was literally the villain of every single Image comic was an evil corporation.
100%.
Spawn, Youngblood, Shadowhawk, Cyberforce, all so we got to go with that, right? So and I didn't actually assume it would be Norman Osborn, but maybe it's Norman Osborn who secretly hires Steve Buscemi to steal the spider before the big opening. Peter Parker's there to photograph it. He sees Buscemi like steal the spider, just photographs him like, ain't my fucking problem. You know what I mean? But then something goes wrong where the security tries to stop Buscemi, or someone else sees him and screams, hey, that guy's still on the spider or whatever. So Buscemi runs and bumps into Cusack and like knocks him over, and like the fucking glass tank that spider was in like shatters, right? Cusack's got maybe it's even more than one spider, but Cusack's got spider on him. He gets bitten. Buscemi's just like fuck, and like pieces out of there. All the security guards run after him, and Cusack's just like, shit, that thing fucking bit me, where'd it go, blah blah blah. And he's not even thinking about the spider. He's just like, what the fuck just happened? And then maybe the cops come up and they're like, oh, you got pictures of this guy? And he's like, I don't know, he said something snide like, oh, not for you or whatever, or he doesn't want to get involved somehow something to do where he's like he's gonna feel guilty later on because he didn't help more.
Right.
So I'll stop right there because I know that was kind of a lot, but I'm thinking like that's the robber, that's the spider, that's the origin story. We could do this in 10 minutes.
Okay. See, now, I went in a completely different direction here with the origin idea. Because I was trying to think of like all the moving parts. Like what would we put in for this movie and then for the sequel? Like what kind of things would we seed, would we thread through for the sequel? So what I was thinking is you take Doc Ock and you take, Kurt Connors, and you have them like working in some kind of like, I don't want to say pharmaceutical company, but something like a medical research group that are doing like huge breakthroughs in like medical technology and, stuff to basically better mankind. And we do very similar to the first Sam Raimi movie where the high school students are touring the facility. And basically have, instead of it being Norman Osborn's research facility, we have it be this medical group, this big, medical facility.
Sure.
And we get to Kurt Connors' lab and we meet the one-armed Dr. Kurt Connors, and we talk about like, cell regrowth and like, limb regrowth. And he has like all sorts of like lizards and insects and like, like crabs and all these creatures that can regrow lost limbs once they lose them. And maybe he even has like a tank full of like these spiders from, deep in the Amazon jungle. We found this, this very specific arachnid that can regrow lost limbs, much like, these lizards and crabs and blah, blah, blah. And of course, one of them gets out, bites Peter, yada, yada, yada. But we have that whole like the medical origin story, but this way we have a reason to come back to Kurt and Ock, later,
Sure.
working together. And like, this would also explain like why Dr. Octopus creates the arms. Maybe he was creating, prosthesis for people who had lost limbs. Like that was another like variation of what they were working on. Like Kurt was trying to do cellular regrowth, whereas Ock was trying to like neurally connect prosthesis. So it's like if you lost your arm, you could have this robotic arm rebuilt, but it would be connected to your spine in a way where it would be connected to your neural network. And you could, think, open my hand, and the robotic hand would open, type of thing, just like, human limbs. So we kind of set that up in the beginning. Hell, maybe Norman is funding it. Maybe that's as simple as, just have him funding the stuff.
Okay, so can we combine these two? Okay, so
yeah.
Something else just went off in my head too. So let's do this. Let's have Betty Brant is like a reporter at the college who works part-time at the Daily Bugle, right? Mm-hmm. So we get Winona Ryder and John Cusack aren't interested in each other. They're just, they're besties, right?
Right.
Betty Brant and Peter Parker. So we do this thing where, so she's writing a story on, oh wow, there's this pharmaceutical research lab, and they're doing this like groundbreaking work, and they're ready to finally tell people about it, and like meet Dr. Octavius, who he has like limited use of his own arms, and so he's creating these like these robotic prosthesis that not only can he use himself, but will help anyone all over the world. Like they're mind controlled, they respond to thought or whatever, which in the 90s was pretty groundbreaking. It actually exists now, but
absolutely.
And so again, make a little change and just make it that Doc Ock, like, not that he doesn't have arms or use of his arms, but maybe like just he has very limited use. So maybe he types with like a voice decoder, and like he doesn't, or maybe one of his arms doesn't really work, that sort of a thing, just to kind of give him a personal stake. And then it's like of course they don't look like octopus tentacles, they're just like generic like robot looking arms, right? And right. Then of course it's like meet Dr. Curtis Connors, and he's doing all this research on all these cell regeneration and all these different animal species, to your point. And so Peter Parker is just the shy, nebbish kid. He's just along for the ride, taking photos of everything, just looking around, not really doing much, saying anything. Winona Ryder's she's like the Nancy from Stranger Things,
Mm-hmm.
That's with the Nancy and Jonathan from Stranger Things relationship. So exactly to your point. And then but maybe we find out that they've been funded by the university or by a private grant, and but now we see Steve Buscemi, again we do the same thing where he breaks in and he's going to steal something from the lab to take it back to his boss Norm Osborn across town at like Oscorp or whatever it was called at the time, because I think Oscorp the name was invented later. And this way we can kind of introduce Connors and Doc Ock. They don't even necessarily need to be players in this particular movie, but they could be, or we have them both set up for a sequel, because you got to have two villains in the sequel.
Of course.
we could do the same thing where maybe Steve Buscemi breaks in, he steals some stuff. Peter's taking pictures. He sees him, doesn't do shit, doesn't say shit. He's just like, whatever, not my problem, and he's just
Mhm.
following Betty Brant along, and she says something along the lines of like, oh, this is gonna be so great, like Mr. Jameson's gonna love this story. You have to meet him, Peter. He's gonna love these photos.
Yep.
And that way, and a little bit later, we can have him get a job at the Bugle, obviously, because now he has this like connection, and that's going to be our segue over to the Bugle offices later on. But I kind of like this idea where, again, Steve, Buscemi takes off with some shit. Peter doesn't say anything, but then again, we have to somewhere in here do the same thing where either Buscemi maybe he drops one of the tanks, and Peter goes over to check it out. Like, oh, what did he drop? Oh, there's a fucking spider. Oh shit, it jumped on me. Oh god,
Right. Or even maybe it's something as oh wait, hold on. Let's backtrack for a second. So what exactly is the timeline we're looking at? Are they in high school when the origin happens, or are they in college when the origin happens?
No, I'm thinking they're already in college. Let's just start like college
Okay,
age. I want the origin to be here. We can maybe skip a few months or something before we get to the action. But yeah, let's just have them be, they're 20 or whatever.
See, because I was thinking that the origin would be told in a flashback of like when they were in high school, this happened, and this is what led to the events of the movie.
Oh, okay. That still works. We could still do that. Like, so we could start with this being like, on the screen it'll be like, 1993 or whatever,
Yeah.
And we'll do this whole sequence, and then we can jump forward a couple of years, and now Betty Brant works at the Bugle, and Peter's in college, and he's secretly Spider-Man now, and we're gonna find that out.
Okay, so why don't we do this? Why don't we go? These are high school students, like seniors in high school, and they're touring this huge college campus that has like this, I don't know if you want to say like medical research development team or something. There's something that is involved at the college where it's like they're the best and the brightest kids are kind of viewing this thing. And while they're on their little tour, maybe Betty Brant, maybe she has an internship at the Bugle. And she's like, oh, we got to, I'm going to totally turn this in for extra credit, that type of thing. I'm like, I'm going to do a report on it. Mm-hmm. While they're doing that, like while they're doing the tour, we get the whole like, Steve Buscemi's character. Maybe he's like one of the other people on the tour with everybody.
Okay.
And it's like some high school students, like some people who are touring, like, professionals, yada, yada. And when they get into Kurt Connor's lab, and they're talking about the cellular regrowth and all that, maybe this is when he pulls a gun, like fires it into the ceiling. He's like, everybody on the floor. Like he grabs Kurt's notes, like his research notes or something like that. And like on his escape, he just starts shoving over like, like big things like various tanks, like big those scaffolding like shelves. Like with different tanks of animals, and he like shoves it over to like kind of clear his escape. And one of the things that breaks open is the spider tank. And, everyone's like, oh my God, are you okay? Are you like everyone? And then while that's happening, Peter gets bit. He's like, oh, what the hell bit me? It's like,
yeah, okay.
He turns and finds the spider dead. And it's like, what the fuck? Or maybe he slaps it and like kills the spider. Mm-hmm. So we have this whole thing where it's like that. We don't know yet who hired Steve Buscemi, and we do the whole thing like you said, like he got photos of him, and the cops are like, well, can you help us? And he's like, this is not for you, this is for my friend's extra credit report type of thing, like screw you, buddy. And then the same robber ends up killing Uncle Ben. Maybe like Uncle Ben was like waiting to pick Peter up after the thing. And then like Steve Buscemi runs out there, fucking shoots him, steals the car, takes off, and like obviously we do the thing where it's like Peter finds out after the fact that he could have stopped it from happening. I don't know how we bridge that gap of like have him go out there and find Uncle Ben, so we can get like the dying breath scene, or maybe we don't even have that. Maybe we have the scene before where we see Uncle Ben like giving Peter, giving him the sage wisdom of with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe Peter is like complaining about like, I don't want to spend my time doing this type of research. Like, this isn't what I want to do with my life. And maybe he tells him, like, Peter, you're extremely smart. You're a bright kid. Like, you have a very talented gift, and he's like, you have to use that to help people. And he tells him, like, with great power comes great responsibility. The whole thing, like, you can help the betterment of mankind with your intelligence type of thing.
Hmm.
So he goes off on this tour that he doesn't want to be there for, and yada yada yada. All this stuff happens. He's a dick to the cops, kind of like a the annoying senior in high school, like fuck you, I'm almost out, that type of thing. And then he goes outside, and we see like the we see the police line, the body bag maybe, and like him realize like, oh no, like, and realize who was killed.
Yeah,
So
no, that's perfect. I like that too, because then we can open the movie with him with Uncle Ben, right? Or maybe we open the movie, the very first scene, like we see he's at home with his aunt and his uncle. Some comment that Aunt May makes about like, oh, you look just like your father, and
mhm.
he was so smart and sharp, just like you. Yeah, exactly. And he's just like, oh man, shut up, and right, yeah. And they leave in the car ride, and so they have Clancy Brown and John Cusack have this whole talk in the car where they're telling the audience like, oh, you're Peter, you're so smart, and you skipped ninth grade, or whatever, and
Right. You mean
you have.
Jack Lemon?
Yeah, sorry. Oh, you're right. Yeah, Jack Lemmon, Clancy Brown's the Captain Stacy. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. So yeah, but they have this whole conversation, like you said, and it leads up to the with great power comes great responsibility line, and then Peter's just like, oh, I roll, and whatever, Dad, or whatever,
Right.
Uncle, and yeah, goes off inside again. He meets up with Winona Ryder, with Betty Brant, like you said, and everything we just talked about. They go inside, and it's like the big exhibit. Peter's bored, and Betty's the one all excited. And really, Peter should be interested in the science stuff, but Betty's excited because it's like this great story. And yeah, to your point, Steve Buscemi comes in, and he like tries to like rob the place and runs off with some notes or something that he can bring to his mysterious boss. And Peter gets pictures of it and like doesn't stop him or say anything, doesn't want to help. Or maybe he sees the cops coming and he like hides the camera, like, oh, I don't even want them to ask me, and
Yeah.
right. And then he's walking home with Betty, and maybe she's or walking back to the car, and maybe she's like, hey Peter, like, why didn't you like show them, you had pictures, right? You had pictures of that guy, like you didn't show the police. And he's like, yeah, I didn't want to get involved, like I'm not a hero, and and my uncle's always trying to tell me that like I need to use my head for more, but blah 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 blah, I just that's not me, that was my dad. I'm always living in like the shadow of my dad. He was like this genius that everybody loved, and that that's not me. And or maybe his dad was like a firefighter, like a hero, somebody
Right.
who saved people's lives, and then yeah, so they're kind of walking down the street, and then they hear something, they hear some sirens or screech of tires or something, and then maybe Betty's like, oh, it's over there, and Peter's like, I was supposed to meet my uncle there. He was going to pick me up. Oh no, and runs off. And
Right.
yeah, and exactly, we get that whole sad scene where he shows up and he's like, man, I could have stopped that guy, that robber guy. I was right there. I watched him do it. And
Mhm.
yeah, so then we're gonna like fast forward, right, a year or two, right, and Peter's in college now, and Betty's working at the Daily Bugle. Maybe she dropped out of school or only goes there part time. So I don't know that I necessarily want to go through like every story beat, because I think if you know the story of Peter Parker, like from here, it kind of makes sense. But we definitely got to show him secretly being Spider-Man, and we should do it soon because we haven't
Oh
seen
yeah.
Spider-Man in the movie yet. You know,
I still think a cold opening is the way to go with that. Like
yeah,
we just
okay,
see like a Spider-Man fight. Like we open the movie with like hell, we could even do this. Okay, hold on. So we open the movie with like some robbers at a convenience store, just like like a little corner shop in New York City, or like a little oh god, what's the word I'm looking for?
like a bodega.
Bodega. Thank you. I could not think of the freaking word. It was escaping me. So yeah, you have like these three armed robbers, like at a bodega, like holding it up, and we meet Eddie Brock. We have him like
Okay,
taking photos from across the street, like, oh my god, like look at this. And then Spider-Man swings in, beats the shit out of these guys, webs them up. Maybe like it's almost in shadow, like webs them up, and the whole time Brock is like taking photos, like this is gold, like that type of a thing. And then like we see, like maybe Spidey gives some quip to him, like kind of like gives him a little nod and swings away. And then we see like maybe later at the Daily Bugle, Peter selling pictures of the same thing, and Brock being like all like "do," like "oh you," that type of thing. And like this way we could kind of introduce the character because I mean, even if we don't have Venom in this movie, he would definitely be in a sequel. It's the 90s. So like,
Yeah.
we would have to like lay some groundwork for some of these characters. So yeah, so we have like a cold opening with that, and then maybe we do the thing where it's like Peter goes home, like we see him, like he goes to an apartment or to his dorm or whatever, and like maybe he looks at a photo
Yep.
of like him, Uncle Ben, and Aunt May like on his counter, and then we kind of zoom in on the photo, and we cut to like 3 years earlier, and we see him sitting at the kitchen table with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, and he's kind of like being annoyed, like I don't want to go on this trip, blah blah blah. And then we do the whole origin like we talked about, and
Yep.
then we do the whole thing with like him, with Peter staring down at like maybe Uncle Ben as they're taking him away in the fucking ambulance, and just like we zoom in on Peter's eyes, and we zoom out and it's present day again, and like Peter just kind of like rubs his face and like goes about his business, and then we cut to the next scene. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like we get the cold opening of Spidey, we introduce another character, get the origin story, boom, back we're into the main story.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely perfect. I was going to say something very similar as soon as you were like, no, we got to have Spider-Man in the cold open. It's like, okay, yeah, you got to have him. He sees something that reminds him of this, key moment in his past, and then we bring back to the present. So I don't really have like plot points beat by beat for anything beyond this. I think we should have a couple of sort of, not, I won't say filler scenes, but we got to kind of fill in the middle of the movie with like, now we see Spider-Man modern day again, beating up some criminals or stopping people. And what I was thinking was we introduce Captain Stacy as, somebody, or Gwen Stacy as Peter's girlfriend, or someone who has a crush on him at school, and maybe he's a nerd, so he doesn't really think, oh, this cute blonde has like a crush on me, and maybe they're talking, and she says something about, oh, my dad, he's a police captain, and oh, he hates that Spider-Man guy, like, oh, he's like a vigilante, and of course he's like, oh, really, and
right,
they can kind of have a little talk that way, because I think that Gwen Stacy I like her as the like sort of a love interest in this story, just like she was in Peter's life and important to Peter Parker in the comics before, he was with Mary Jane. And I'm just going to jump ahead because I want to explain what I want to do with Craven, and I think that will kind of like sum up like the point of this particular movie.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that between J. Jonah Jameson and Captain Stacy, like, obviously they're trying to drum up public dislike for Spider-Man. Like they want to sort of ruin his reputation. People think he's a hero, but maybe over the last year or two that he's come out and become a costumed hero. And now between the police and J. Jonah Jameson, who loves to get quotes from Captain Stacy bagging on Spider-Man, it's like they're turning the public perception against him. And I think that that's an important aspect of this, or at least they're trying to. And I want to introduce Norman Osborn, if we go with what's it, John Lithgow we picked, right?
Mm-hmm.
We introduced Norman Osborn, and yeah, he's like this, he's this corporate mover and shaker. I don't want to see him in the Goblin costume. I just want to see him as like he's the Lex Luthor in this movie, right? He is the corporate industrialist, always in his suit, always prim and proper, but like he's a little bit unhinged under the surface, and
right.
And we see, just like in the Sam Raimi movie, it's like he's trying to get like military contracts to sell, big buck things to the government. So he's into weapons, and he's into like transports, and he wants to get into like super soldier shit, which is why we find out, he secretly funded Buscemi to go and steal some stuff from those two fucking nerds, from,
exactly.
from Connors and Octavius. And, he has this sort of like, it's like he sort of dismisses everybody from his office, and he opens up like a hidden door in the back of his like big suite at the top of a high rise, and Buscemi comes in all like, I got what you asked for, boss. Yeah, see.
I wasn't giving him a sign.
yeah, exactly. So but at this point too, well, of course, this is a couple of years later after the initial thing, but like Buscemi's like still working for him, because we got to make that connection. But in this case, it was like he stole something else, or he was spying on somebody. And what we find out is that Norman he's pissed off that he wasn't able to like replicate Connors and Octavius's biological research. He wasn't able to replicate it from what Buscemi stole. Maybe he makes some comment about like, oh, you're gonna fuck this up the way you screwed up when I wanted you to steal current Connors research. But he also knows that Spider-Man's out there because he's reading the Daily Bugle, and or maybe that's how we're first seeing like the Daily Bugle. In these old movies, you'd see someone like slam the newspaper down on a table, and then you pan up and see their face, and right, and we see Osborn looking at more pictures, and he's like, this guy, where does this guy come from with these spider powers? Like, it's no coincidence that I wanted you to get the research from Connors, and he was working with animals like spiders, and now this guy, like, and the timing is very suspicious, Steve Buscemi. so maybe he's like, I need you to find out who this guy is. Go spy on him for me, and so Osborn hates him, and we can have a couple of scenes where we see Spider-Man maybe stopping a crime, and maybe Buscemi's there taking pictures of him, spying on him or something, or hell, maybe he even like makes a deal with Eddie Brock, like, oh, take a picture get me some pictures of the Spider-Man guy, but I want him just for me, follow him home, whatever, right. something like that, right? But what's going to eventually happen is that because J. Jonah Jameson and Captain Stacy are like turning the public perception against Spider-Man, eventually Osborn's going to get frustrated that Steve Buscemi, he's going to take him out because he's worthless. He's useless. He's proven himself useless, right? He's like, and he's like, I can't take down Spider-Man. I hired these criminals to kill him, and they couldn't kill him, and no one stops him, and he's just a thorn in my side. But I want this guy, and that's what he wants. He just wants him to, for like research, purposes. Like, I need your body. Bring me your body so I can find out what's in your blood.
Right.
So he hires Kraven. He decides that he's gonna hire Kraven the Hunter, the guy who says he can track and hunt and capture anything, and he's like, fucking prove it then. Come to New York and catch me the Spider-Man. And it's going to be like this big media thing where it's going to be in the papers. Oh, Kraven's coming. And of course, at this point, people don't really like Spider-Man as much because he's been smeared. And so, it's really going to be like people are like rooting for like, yeah, Kraven, go get him. Go get that, vigilante thug. We don't need him. And so then, what I want to do is I want to have, Kraven comes in, tries to catch Spider-Man. Spider-Man gets away. He's embarrassed. He goes back to Osborn. It's like, I need more gear. I need better shit,
Right.
And I'm just picturing this one scene where Osborn is like, come with me, go to the armory, and he's got the fucking glider, like the Goblin glider, right? And he's like, oh, like this is a new experimental one. We call it the Goblin Mark 1 or whatever,
Yep.
Because I would love to see fucking Kraven the Hunter flying around on a Goblin glider with like compound bows and shit, trying to kill Spider-Man. Like, that would just be a fun thing to see in a movie.
That really would be.
And if Kraven is fucking evil, Mel Gibson's unhinged, and I would love to do some variation of that scene that Sam Raimi did in the first Spider-Man, where he replaced Drew Barrymore, or he replaced Gwen Stacy with Mary Jane. But that famous scene from the comics where in the comics it's Green Goblin, and he basically has like a cable car full of innocent civilians on one hand and Spider-Man's girlfriend on the other hand, and he's like, you got to save one of them. And Spider-Man tries to save them both. In the movie, it works out, but in the original comics, it doesn't. And Gwen Stacy famously dies. The death of Gwen Stacy is a really, famous storyline. So I think it would be interesting. Again, it's the 90s, so we're changing shit arbitrarily, right? But at the same time, trying to pick good storylines from the comics. So yeah, we have Kraven. At first he fails, and then he goes and gears up with better stuff, and then he pulls off maybe he finds out who Peter Parker really is, or at least he notices that he likes that blonde chick a whole hell of a lot, and he does the Sophie's choice between save these innocent civilians or save this blonde chick, and Spider-Man has to make a choice.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely worked.
So I know that was a whole lot, but that's where I was coming. I just wanted to get Craven in this movie, and it's like we can do some of these famous storylines, but with a villain we haven't seen in real life on the big
Right.
screen yet.
Yeah, so no, I really dig the Craven idea. I think Mel Gibson as Craven is fucking sweet. Definitely dig that. Here, like, I know we gotta wrap this up because we're both running out of time. Unfortunately, life is always getting in the way of our creativity. But here's the story beats that I had written down at when we first talked about, like, if we were to do a Spider-Man movie in the 90s, like, what would the story be? And one of the things I was thinking about is, like, back in the 90s, it was always like, try to get, like, just fill these movies with pandemonium. It's like, if you look at the Batman movies, it was like every fucking scene craziness was happening.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, how could we fit a ton of stuff in? And of course, always thinking franchise, like, what's the next movie going to be? So let's do everything the way we mentioned, the origin story, the whole college thing, the robber stealing something from a mysterious benefactor, all that. What I was thinking is when we fast forward into the future where Peter's at college, he starts kind of working with Kurt and Octavius, almost because again, taking what his Uncle Ben had said to him about, like, you have a gift, use that to help people, blah blah blah. So he's trying to help Otto and Kurt, come up with ways to help to advance medical science. So
Okay.
much to the dismay of both Otto and Peter, Kurt seems to be getting more and more down this rabbit trail of, like, splicing animal DNA with human DNA. Rather than trying to, like, replicate what these animals do, he's trying to, like, actually merge the two. So they keep trying to tell him, like, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, he becomes the lizard, as we expect. So now Otto and Peter are trying to keep it hush hush. Meanwhile, Spider-Man is trying to catch Dr. Kurt Connors. While this is going on, we have murders start happening around the city. Like, and of course, J. Jonah Jameson is going to blame Spider-Man. Captain Stacy going to blame Spider-Man. Eddie Brock's going to be out there trying to catch Spider-Man in the act. And meanwhile, Spider-Man is trying to catch his friend, who he thinks, oh shit, in his lizard form, he's committing these murders. Because maybe people are, like, torn the fuck up, like shredded, like, real sadistic shit. So movie rolls along, and maybe we could even do, like, the whole, as far as Mary Jane, Harry, Flash, and Gwen is concerned, maybe we can even do the thing where it's like, they're just friends of his at college. Maybe Harry is interested in Mary Jane, but secretly she's kind of got eyes for Peter, but Peter's more interested in Gwen, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be big. We could just have those characters.
Yeah, they can just be like a group of friends who hang out and chit chat, and they don't all have to have, like, their own story arc in this movie.
They hang out at the Peach Pit. But so what I was thinking is the movie would basically culminate around Peter trying to stop Kurt. Otto, again, he's just there kind of as a future character. And the whole thing with Eddie, again, future character.
Yep.
So yeah, we'd have, we have this whole fight with Peter and the Lizard, or with Spider-Man and the Lizard. Maybe he's able to safely take down the Lizard, turns him back to his human form, and unfortunately has to, like, turn in his friend. So he's arrested, so he won't harm anybody else again. Because maybe he still thinks, like, the Lizard is responsible for killing all those people. So we fast forward, Lizard's in jail, all that. And we end the movie, or we get close to the end of the movie with, we see the real killer is none other than Cletus Cassidy, who is this serial killer who's out there murdering people. And maybe Spidey stops him. Like, maybe that's, like, the final act is, like, he stops Cletus, he gets him in jail, yada, yada, yada. So now we know the character is on the board. Like, we know he's going to be there eventually. And the whole time, I feel like Norman could just kind of be in the background pulling strings. Because what I was thinking was, like, part 2 would revolve around some kind of medical experiment going horribly wrong. Take a page out of the Ultimate Spider-Man book, and the symbiote is created in the lab.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
not an
an
alien.
alien.
Yeah. And then maybe whether it latches onto we could even do the whole thing where it latches onto Spidey first. He has to break free of it, like it's feeding on his emotions, it's turning him more and more violent. We could have Eddie get caught up with it somehow, and his hatred for Peter, both the symbiote's hatred for Peter for shedding him, and Eddie's hatred for Peter, they join together. Now we have Venom in the mix. That movie, of course, could end with Eddie going to jail and the symbiote trying to rescue him, and then Cletus getting part of the symbiote, yada, yada, yada. And the third and final movie could be Spider-Man trying to face off against the two fucking symbiotes. Meanwhile, Norman finally got his funding, or figured out everything he wanted to do, and we have the fucking Green Goblin in the mix. Because you always got to go big for the third one. So, but that's just kind of like the story beats that I was originally thinking. Although I really like the idea of Kraven the Hunter, hunting Spider-Man down on some Green Goblin gear. I like that a lot. So what if we go with that idea, but instead of Norman being the one to fund this whole thing, maybe we soft pedal Norman's involvement. Jay Jonah is constantly like, we got to take this guy down. Blah, blah, blah. We could even do some of the other story beats. Like we could have these murders taking place that Jonah is convinced is the Spider-Man. It's not Cassidy, it's the Spider-Man. And then maybe Norman could approach Jonah and be like, I'll tell you what, I want this guy taken down too. I'm going to fund a big publicity stunt for you. Like, I don't want any credit. You take credit for it, Jonah. Here's a shitload of money. Hire this guy and publicize it. And basically get the public against Spider-Man. Of course, Jonah's going to make this whole fucking media circus. Because correct me if I'm wrong, Kraven's introduction, wasn't it Jonah who brought in Kraven in the first place?
I believe it was. Yeah, I think so. And that's a big part of why I wanted to make sure we got the Daily Bugle in there, because I really wanted Kraven. So I think I have a way to make it work, but I'll let you finish.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking that we would do the same thing that you said, only have the only change is soft pedal Norman's involvement, as far as like we as the viewer know he's involved, but like the people in the story other than Jonah doesn't know he's involved. So maybe even Harry doesn't know. Like maybe Harry is secretly a Spider-Man fan. Like he's like, I think he's cool. That type of a thing.
For sure.
So yeah, so it's all hush hush for now.
I think that's great. So this might be a little over the top, but I think it'll work. We're talking about James Cameron, right? James Cameron is the director. He's going to go over the top. He's going to go action scenes. It's going to be a long movie, right? Because Terminator 2, The Abyss, Titanic, these are all like pretty long movies. So he's going to try to cram as much in there as he possibly can while he has the chance, So what if we did this? What if we moved the cold open sequence where we introduce Eddie Brock and the pictures, and we move that to after the flashback, and we start off with a big badass cold open, action packed, where we do this thing where it's like as the screen comes up, the movie starts, you're seeing like covers of the Daily Bugle like spin up to the screen, and you're seeing the headlines, and it's like, third murder in a week, like New York City on lockdown, like here's the next paper, and it's like, the serial killer still on the loose, everybody advised to stay at home or whatever, and it's like there's something dangerous, like, like brutal murder spree continues,
Right.
And then we see this dark figure, who this big hulking dark figure like runs into like a sewer drain or something, right? And then you see a smaller dark figure come down on some webs and like follow him, and we have this scene where it's like you're just starting with there's a monster in the sewer, and this hero's coming, and then like, oh shit, it's Spider-Man, and Spider-Man, he's like, he says, Dr. Connors, please, you have to stop this, I know it's you. And then the camera turns to the monster, who turns his head into the light, and it's, oh fuck, it's like the fucking big lizard creature,
Right.
And then he's just like, like, I don't want to hurt you, Dr. Connors, like, I can help you, and then of course they have a big fight and they're splashing in the sewer and all this stuff. And, and Spider-Man takes him down and he knocks him out and he like, transforms back into this human. And you see, it's like this regular, dude with like one arm. And who'd we say this was going to be? Like William Sadler, right?
Yep.
And then, of course he takes him out and he gets him to the police and he tells them, he's like, they're going to get you the help that you need, doctor or stranger, I don't know.
Right.
And so we have this big action-packed sequence, and then the cops are like, "Yo, you caught the killer," and who are you? Like, what do we call you? And of course, he's like, "I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man." And then you get,
Yep.
the '90s, right? I want to get a Red Hot Chili Peppers playing like this, Spider-Man, Spider-Man.
Yes. Fuck yeah.
The old cartoon theme song all funked out, right? You get the credit sequence. And then we do this thing where it's like, we see that same Spider-Man, like he gets home and takes his costume off, takes his mask off. Oh, sweet, it's John Cusack. He's in his dorm room or whatever. He sees the photograph of Uncle Ben, has the whole flashback. We do the entire flashback sequence like we said we were going to do. And then he flashes back to the present, and then it's like maybe he hears like a siren or he hears like an alarm go off, like a bank alarm or something, and he's like, oh, like never a dull day, whatever, puts his mask back on, jumps out the window. He goes and stops some guys who are like knocking up an ATM or whatever. And then you see like click, 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 click. And like, oh, here's, fucking Eddie Brock on the scene to like get the pictures, and it's like, we're just going beat, 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 beat. We're going to just hit him like fast, 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 fast. Eddie Brock gets the pictures, and then like the next day he's like at the Daily Bugle. He's like, "Look, boss! Like, look at these awesome pictures. I got a Spider-Man stopping the criminals." And of course, Jane Jonah Jameson is just like, like, "Get out of here! I got better pictures already from this guy."
Yep.
And then John Cusack walks in, and he's like, "Sorry, Eddie," and Eddie's just like, "Oh, shucks," like
foiled again.
Exactly. And then you see Betty Brant's working there because we met her in the flashback, and she's working there, and then we get this whole introduction and then you have all these characters, and J. Jonah Jameson is screaming and yelling, and Denzel Washington comes in. This Robbie Robertson is like, Jonah, you got to calm down.
Think of your blood pressure, boy.
Exactly. Maybe it's Peter who's like, could I get like, paid for the pictures? And Jameson's like, what do you mean paid? I talk to the to the girl at the front, whatever. And of course, Denzel Washington's like, here's a check, son. Like he said the voice of reason. Yeah, and then it's like we get the lizard, we get the whole flashback with like we get to see who the Kurt Connors was he was talking to, like in the flashback, right? We see the Doc Ock, and then he leaves the maybe Betty's like, "Hey, Peter, are you going back to the dorm?" And he's like, "Oh no, I got to go to work first." Like, "Oh, the day never ends." And he goes off to like the lab at like the college or whatever, where he's working with Dr. Octavius still, and he tells him, it's like, he's like, "Oh, I heard somebody caught Dr. Connors. Did you hear?" Whatever.
Right.
It's like he's trying not to like let it on, that he knows. And and then he works for a little while. Maybe the next day we get a quiet sequence where now they're at like the diner hanging out with like Flash and Harry, and we get like a cool dialogue sequence and they're talking about what they're gonna do. And of course, like, "Oh, Peter, you never come along with us and have any fun. You're always studying or working or doing something. Like, what is it that you do at night all the time?"
Right.
Yeah, and then we can do that sequence where we meet, or maybe Harry's like, "Oh, I gotta stop in my dad's office first. Like, I'll meet you guys later." Blah blah blah. That's just a segue to get us to the Norman Osborn's office. He sees his dad, and John Lithgow's all like, "Oh, hey, son, how's it going?" All super happy. And as soon as he leaves, he like pushes a button, and he's just like, "Get in here." And his like thugs come in, and we have a little sequence about like whatever. Like, it's been a couple years since the flashback sequence with Steve Buscemi, but there's some back and forth about like this Spider-Man guy's still out there, and then maybe we get the sequence where it's like they run a story in the Bugle, like monster caught in the sewers, killer still at large. And of course Peter's like, "What do you mean killer still at large? Like, I got him." And then maybe the next day like someone else gets murdered. He's like, "What? Like, it wasn't Dr. Connors?"
Yeah.
And then we kind of have a little bit of a mystery where like Peter's balancing his day life with trying to like hang out with his friends and work with Dr. Octavius, but then at night he's like trying to follow the killer. He busts Cletus. It's not a big thing, like maybe for the second act of the movie or whatever. He busts Cletus, puts him in jail, and this is where it's like J. Denzel Washington's character, Robbie Robertson, he's trying to be like, look, Jonah, like you have to run the story. Spider-Man caught the serial killer, like he's the hero. And of course, Jameson's like, I'll never run that trash. Like, like he was in on it. I swear they were in on it together. It's all a sham.
Oh, we could even do something where Jonah's like, he didn't catch the killer. He framed an innocent man. He was the killer, and I'll prove it. And then he does the whole thing where he maybe before Spider-Man catches Cletus, we have Norman, funding Jonah, being like, you need to catch this guy. Like maybe he even plants the seed in Jonah's ear of like, we both know who this killer is. Think about it. And all the city, like, who could it possibly be? And he plants the seed of like, don't trust it. It's definitely Spider-Man. Now, a couple days later, comes out like, oh, serial killer caught. And Jonah's like, bullshit. He framed an innocent guy. It's Spider-Man, and I'll prove it. And that's when he hires Craven to come in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with like Norman's money, he hires
exactly.
Craven. Yeah, Craven comes in, like he comes to town. He's like, oh, please, no pictures. But of course, he's basking in the attention. He fucking loves it. Have Mel Gibson use his like old Australian accent. And
right.
Yeah, he has to have a failed attempt to catch Spider-Man. Like, okay, this guy's more. He's tougher and he's more of an opponent than I thought he was going to be. So yeah, Craven goes back to, maybe he goes back to Jonah and he's like, I need more money, I need more gear, whatever. And Jonah's like, what do you mean? You're a scam artist trying to like, shake me down for more money. Catch him like you said you would.
I knew you were a fake all along.
Exactly. But then of course, somebody gets the word to Norman, or Norman's already there for some reason, and he's just like, oh, come with me, son. He takes Craven to his little armory. He's like, take whatever you want. It's like Christmas, and like, oh, I see you like that glider. That's the goblin, and whatever.
Yes.
And and then Craven goes on the hunt again. But this time, instead of just going directly for like catching Spider-Man, now he's going to track him. He's going to follow him. Maybe he finds out who he is. Maybe maybe he sees Spider-Man like, he rescued that blonde girl twice already. What's up with that? Whatever. The Gwen Stacy, right? Somehow, I don't know if I necessarily want him to find out his identity right away, because of course I feel like he would tell Osborn, but there's got to be some connection between Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy, so that Craven decides, oh, I'm going to use her as my bait. And then
right.
Of course we do the whole sequence where he lures Spider-Man out between like, who are you going to save? This girl you seem to like, or this, busload of innocent people. But then of course the question is, do we have Spider-Man rescue everybody, including Gwen Stacy, and like take down the Hunter and, kind of out him to like the legitimate press that, he was just a killer? Or do we have Gwen Stacy die? Do we do the death of Gwen Stacy in our first Spider-Man movie? I don't know.
I mean, I feel like yes, for one reason, because if we do the Venom and Cletus story in the next movie, we would need Peter to be kind of rageful. So if he fails, like if Gwen dies, maybe he beats the fucking hell out of Craven, like puts the dude in traction type of thing, like unbridled rage. And now in the next movie, like if we were to jump into the sequel, we would start off with maybe Peter's having like trouble controlling his anger. The whole thing of like, with great power comes great responsibility, but what if I can't be responsible? That type of thing.
Yeah,
and like, so now the whole time, like he's just angry, but he's helping Doc Ock, work on this, whatever chemical compound that they're working on to like, maybe again, they're trying to do the regrowth thing. They're trying to like honor Kurt's studies and be like, we need to learn to regrow human tissue. And maybe that was the point of the symbiote to begin with, is it would latch onto a host body and slowly, almost like nanotech, would like slowly start to regrow tissue. But instead it feeds off of not only the person's body, but it feeds off of their emotions, their desires. It's almost like a sentient creature in and of itself. So like it latches on to Peter. Like maybe they do something like, okay, time to test it. And like Peter like cuts his hand and they drip like a single drop of the symbiote on it and watch as it like slowly heals the wound. And then they're like, holy crap, it worked. Eventually it latches on to Peter. We do the whole emotional thing of like, he can't contain his rage. So he becomes like a very brutal Spider-Man. Like maybe he's like trying to stop a car thief, and he like punches the hood of the car, and the whole fucking thing flips, you know, and he's just like, holy shit, you know, like we do that whole thing, and we would need something to catapult Peter from the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to piss the fuck off Spider-Man, and I think the death of Gwen Stacy in the first movie would do that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I like that too. Like Gwen dies, and then Spider-Man just beats the holy living hell out of Craven. But it's all being like televised, right? At this point, right? It's all in the
Yeah.
media. Cameras and reporters and television crews have all come out, and now, maybe, we see on the news, they're like, oh, Spider-Man, like the hero, like he stopped this maniac, this Craven guy, he kidnapped this girl and like held this like bus of people for, as like hostage. Like, holy crap, like who had hired this guy, who invited him here,
Yeah.
and maybe that back at the Bugle offices, you see like you see J. Jonah Jameson, and he's like he's doing a paste up, like a mock up for the next day's paper, and he's like, Craven a fraud, Spider-Man in on it or whatever, and Robbie
Right.
Robertson walks in and is just like, Jonah, we need to talk, and it's like that's like the end of it, like he's like,
Yeah.
Robbie Robertson is going to finally be like, look, you got to stop this, and so instead, when the paper comes out, it's like Spider-Man's a hero, and one dead in tragic downtown accident with Australian, game hunter or whatever, whatever the headline is, but it's
fraudulent
like,
hunter.
yeah, fraudulent hunter, one dead, 3 injured in tragic accident, Spider-Man the hero. Yeah, so that's why Spider-Man kind of wins out. Now everyone likes him again. The perception has shifted from we don't like him to now we like him. He's a big hero. He stopped the villain, and obviously Peter knows he stopped the serial killer. He stopped the lizard monster. He stopped Craven. Like, yeah, he's a big fucking hero. But at the end of the day, like, Gwen died, and so yeah, he's gonna be super depressed at the end of the movie, but he's got to keep going. He can't stop being Spider-Man, because with great power comes great responsibility.
Yep. I dig it.
Yeah, me too. I know this one ran a little bit long, and we both got to go, and I kind of feel like we were, trying to wrap it up here at the end, but I'm glad we took the time to like put a bow on it, and I think it works. We did paint in broad strokes, but I still think we kind of mapped out the 3 acts of the movie pretty well, and I dig it. Like, I feel like there's a lot of stuff here, and it feels like a James Cameron movie, because man, he likes to pack stuff in.
Oh God, yeah. Like he's kind of known for it. And
Yeah,
again, look at his Avatar stuff. Like, he thinks in like 3, 4, and 5 movies at a time. Like, I mean, hell, he even wanted to come back to Aliens on 2 occasions because he had more Aliens ideas. But like, yeah. So I feel like if he had the reins, he would pack a lot of shit in the hopes that maybe we get a part 2, maybe we get a part 3.
Yeah, I think we could. Yeah, for sure. To your point, we do the whole Venom thing in the second movie. Maybe Carnage in the third movie. We get Doc Ock in there somewhere. And I think we end this first movie in a similar way to the first Sam Raimi one, where it's like at a funeral. They're at Gwen's funeral, and and maybe Peter's friends are trying to cheer him up, and or maybe Harry even says, "Hey, I can get you a job working with my dad," and he's like, he has to turn it all down because he has to keep devoting his time to working with Dr. Octavius to, complete the research and, secretly have that free time that he needs. But of course, he's going to walk off and feel like, he can't have the life that he wants because, he's burdened with this responsibility, and, kind of ended on a serious note.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Red Hot Chili Peppers earlier, and I was thinking like that first Sam Raimi movie too. They had that Nickelback theme song, right? That was like a big deal. And I was like, who's the Nickelback of like the mid '90s that would do like the Maudlin theme song over the credits? And all I could think of was Live. The band Live.
Yeah.
They did like,
lightning crash.
Exactly. Yeah. And they would do some theme song about like, the day we truly need a hero or something, like, and it would be super, sappy.
Nice.
Oh,
Hell
man.
Yeah.
I think we did it, man.
Definitely. No, I think this would have been something that the fans would have eaten up. Hell, I know I would have.
Yeah, I would have been all over it. And I love all the fan service of trying to stick in a whole bunch of characters, fit a bunch of them in, and we'll put some more in the sequels, obviously. And, we had a lot of fun doing the fan cast, even though we didn't get to, Mysterio or Vulture or any of them, but whatever.
Right.
Those are always the fun parts of the episodes. So,
Oh, absolutely.
with that, I think we should wrap it up, and I'll let everyone know once again that they can find out more about this show at raisedbyrentals.com or at raisedbyrentals on all the socials. And we are a part of the Rad Pantheon, a super team of podcasters, artists, musicians, you name it. It's an art collective of creative friends supporting each other and helping to spread the word about rad stuff. So if you like this show, there's a good chance you'll dig one or more of the Rad Pantheon teammate projects. Mike, you got some of those going on.
Indeed. The Boogeyman's Closet is back from hiatus. We are doing our All Nightmare on Elm Street month. There will still be 2 specials, one that doesn't involve Nightmare on Elm Street and one that does. So we will have that coming out all this month. And also Count Creepyhead's Saturday Morning Monster Mash, where 3 grown man children bitch about pop culture and talk about toys.
Always a good time. So yeah, I will encourage everyone to check out radpantheon.com and Rad Pantheon on the socials for all the other projects. So I won't have to list them off here. If you listen to Count Creepyhead Saturday Morning Monster Mash, though, Michael LeMay does a good job of trying to plug everybody every week. And so I think that is awesome, and definitely keep it up. You can find out more about what I do on Instagram at Comics Boost. Just spell that with an X, Comics Boost on Instagram, where I spotlight crowdfund campaigns for comic book projects. And with that, thanks everyone once again for tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, let us know what you think. Leave a comment, leave a podcast rating. Tell us what you think we should improve next time. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
And we have to return some videotapes. Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud, he's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man. In the chill of night, at the scene of a crime, like a streak of light, he arrives just in time. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Wealth and fame, he's ignored. Action is his reward. To him, life is a great big bang up wherever there's a